that was such a great conversation, Rhoda. It's hard with the trust issue to just end it there. So
Yeah.
uh, the trust conversation is such a big one in this whole show. It would be fun to keep going for a few more minutes.
Let's do it.
So
Let's
like go ahead.
go. I'm listening, but
Okay.
where do you think his trust issue started? I'm gonna say with Huma and the fact that she left him with Emre and Aziz Bey, took off and did her own thing.
Clearly, clearly, it's not just a thing to families break up, but the way that she took Imre, she chose a son, to take and left him behind, and then not just taking his brother who he loved. He never got to see him. They didn't even speak the same language. Aziz buried himself in work, so then he didn't have his own father. So he actually sent himself away to school, so then not to be a burden to his father either. What a horrible thing for a child to feel like he was deserted by his mother, taken away from his brother, and then sent himself away to school not to burden his father as well. So he outcasted himself, and then further on in life, this is what he chose to um, live out in the wild, to be a photograph, to photograph life on his own, to be um, what's the word I'm looking for, independent of all other people, and to spend life
Yeah.
unattached, um, so that he didn't develop relationships with anyone, even with Pauline, who was probably his most consistent relationship. They spoke about it many times. He met with her a couple of times a year. They never really spoke about him having any other relationships at all. He spoke often about wanting to have a close relationship with Emre, um, but he didn't have it. Imre often spoke about, um, John just always left.
Right.
He'd pop in and he'd leave. He'd pop in and he'd leave. So um, he didn't actually have relationships, let alone trustful ones. So what chance did he
Mm.
have? So even though he seemed like the cool guy who had it all together, he just had himself.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely didn't have it all together, but I also think that the writers left a lot of it to our imaginations because every now and then throughout the series, someone would pop up that was apparently significant to his past. Gamzee is one that I can think of. They apparently had had some kind of relationship. It
A,
never, they never like zeroed in on exactly what,
a
if he had
friendship.
emotional ties to her. Um, but to
Uh,
his definition of friendship, relationship, lines blurred from my perspective. So we don't know. Um,
that
we
is
can
true.
just assume.
He did have that is
Yeah,
true. He did have friendships. He had Metin.
he had
Um,
Madden and all those people that popped up at his birthday party. Remember later on in the
yeah,
series. So yeah,
he did.
and that's a problem. They don't like spend a lot of time developing what happened in their past and whatnot. We can only assume
Hmm.
that Paulin was probably one of the more significant people outside of Sanem because that's what they chose to focus on. I'm assuming that's what it was. Um, but even at that, that was nothing to write home about. His relationship with her from a perspective, a woman's perspective. Imagine only seeing your mate a couple of times a year and Yeah,
I
no.
did hear her say, and I never understand, I never know how good my translations are. I would love, I am hoping that now that we have the Spanish version, that maybe we might get a good English translation, because Spanish translates pretty easily. We might actually get a
Okay.
good translation, but I heard her say a couple of times, he always comes back to me. So that did lead me to
Mhm.
believe that they didn't have, like he always wasn't, it wasn't always just her, because she wouldn't have said he always comes back to me. Um,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and look at him. I imagine that he had some other ladies besides Pauline.
yeah,
I can't picture in that of his significance and physically and otherwise being alone for the majority of the year. So
right. That would just be
that might
silly.
be something to explore in the fiction aspect, that we create. But I might have gotten a couple of ideas from that thought just now. But
So it
yeah,
is interesting how he had such high standards. Where did those high standards come from? Was it because his mom left? Was it because he was never going to have, he was never going to engage in any kind of relationship where it could go like the way it did with his mom, and he would never tolerate anyone lying to him that way? Was he just that fragile? I mean, it did appear that he was just that fragile, that he just couldn't tolerate uh, the pain of that kind of disappointment.
what do you guys think in the audience? Make sure you respond to that question. Where do you think Divit's high standards came from? Or do you think his standards were high? Do you think that he was expecting too much from Sanam? Um, I don't know. I think it's normal to expect some level of trust and loyalty. But I don't think his reaction to her breach of trust was normal or even acceptable. So it's hard for me to answer that question. Was it a high standard or not? I don't know. I think he had normal expectations, but um, his past issues might have made him take it over the top. He did too much.
And was Sanem right to be so afraid? You know, it seemed like it could have been just a simple conversation between adults.
Yeah.
Um, but of course, that wouldn't have been nearly as exciting of a storyline.
Yeah, I think her fear was driven from the fact that she had taken this money from Imre to help her father. Um, so was she afraid that if she spilled the beans at this point that everything was gonna, her father was gonna lose out on everything, or
Well,
um,
there is two sides to the story, and there was all the chirping in Sanem's ear, to the point of her sister and Emre rushing to the scene to stop her from telling him the truth. Um, when he was proposing, don't tell him the truth.
right.
Well, like there was always other players involved,
Mhm.
um, of course, for the storyline, which sometimes was over the top too.
Let's face it, the storyline was over the top multiple times. Like I couldn't really get over the fact that Emery, after everything that he had done and like essentially destroyed this girl's life, totally lied to his brother, he got away scot-free. In the overall story,
Right? And he
I
comes
I don't
out
know how I really
happily
feel that way.
married. Oh, come on.
Right, right.
Like
He
never
got
even
away
a
totally scot-free.
discussion. I'm talking over you guys. It's such an
I,
appalling storyline. Like nobody ever said, anything to him, like, you
Yeah.
bad boy, or anything. Come on.
Even
Yeah.
Divit's response at the end, I guess when he was reading the book, the book that Sonam ended up writing and found out the role that Emery played, he was just like, "Oh, that's okay, brother." No way. Are you kidding me? I guess after he had a sabbatical, that was supposed to be his new look on life. He doesn't react the way he used to. I guess that lends to his response to Emery at that point. But
That's a whole nother conversation of of, you know, of what Emre got away with.
yeah, I mean, it's all related because John changed so much at the end. So if he had high standards, I guess they eventually lowered because I mean, proof is the way that his acceptance of Emery after all he had done to destroy his trust. Um, he allowed himself to trust him again. And I guess that is the whole point of um, a character's development. If he hadn't changed, then if John hadn't changed in the end, then this whole journey would have been worthless. When That's one thing that I look for in character development myself personally is change from the beginning to the end. What happens differently, how in their behavior. So to me, it's all related.
Right. Right. How do they grow? Oh gosh, and that's a story, that's a subject for another day. How did these characters grow from beginning to end?
Mhm.
Amazing storyline. Well, girl, I am out of battery and out of time.
Okay. All right,
Thanks
guys.
for the
Don't forget to
invitation.
like and subscribe to this. Please, please. It matters so much. And it lets us know that you're here in a part of the conversation. And that's most important. We want you to be here and a part of the conversation too. So drop your comments below, like and subscribe. And guess what? We'll see you next time. Take care.
See you next time.